Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. And as it happens, we're going to talk about the Dungeons & Dragons feat, Lucky. Yes, is this feat lucky? Well, I think it pretty much is a very lucky feat, a very powerful feat, and possibly the best Dungeons & Dragons 5e feat in the game, which is why so many people want to use it, and probably why a lot of dungeon masters feel like they need to nerf this particular feat or exclude it from the selection of feats when they're running their game. I can totally understand that. But what I want you to do is turn to page 167 of the Player's Handbook, and we're going to discuss the feat Lucky. I'm going to go over it in detail. I'm then going to explain it. I'm going to talk about sage advice, and yes, I'm definitely going to use maps, miniatures and dice and sort of go through the basics of this particular feature. Okay, so let's start off with what it has in the book. Lucky. You have inexplicable luck that seems to kick in at just the right moment. You have 3 luck points. Whenever you make an attack roll, an ability check, that includes skill checks, or a saving throw, you can spend 1 luck point to roll an additional D20 or 20-sided dice. You can choose to spend 1 of your luck points after you roll the die or dice, but before the outcome is determined. Now, when it says this, what that means is the outcome being determined doesn't mean, look, if you already know what the DC for a particular check is because your Dungeon Master has told you, that's beside the point, okay? The dice can be rolled first and then you make a decision after that, okay? That's the whole concept behind the use of this rule. You choose which of the D20s is used for the attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. Now that's nice and simple. I'm going to show you what I mean by that very, very shortly, but it's going to get more complicated when we deal with something like advantage and disadvantage. Don't worry, we'll cover that. You can also spend 1 luck point when an attack roll is made against you, which is always awesome. Now, that does not, when it says an attack roll, it does not include ability checks that are made against you, as in the form of a contest. It does not include something like a saving throw, so you can't sort of use those, just the attack roll. Okay, all right, roll a d20 and then choose whether the attack uses the attacker's roll or your dice roll. Very nice, awesome. If more than 1 creature spends a luck point to influence the outcome of a roll, the points cancel each other out. No additional dice are rolled. Okay, so that particular element of the rule basically means that if the Dungeon Master has a creature with something like Lucky, then what they can do is they can play that luck point and cancel out your use of luck. So it's certainly something that a Dungeon Master could utilize in their game if they really wanted to. Now, it also means that you need to communicate with your players to make sure that a player doesn't try to use a luck point when you're using a luck point, because if you use a luck point and then say the cleric also decides they're going to try to use a luck point to influence a roll of some kind, then that can really sort of mess things up. But usually you can only influence your own dice rolls or an attack roll made against you. That's the basics behind it. You regain your expended luck points when you finish a long rest. So you have to finish a long rest and then you get everything back, which is wonderful. Okay, so you can see why it's probably one of the best feats in the game. So what I want to do is I'm going to demonstrate a little bit about what's going on here, and we're going to talk about sage advice at the same time. I am utilizing let's say a cleric. This is my dwarf cleric. This is the barbarian who's come along to help out, and they have with them a cyclops who's about to attack them and probably smash a few trees in the process. So let's talk about sage advice, and then sort of I'll roll through and show you the process as we go. Okay, so first off, with luck. You're making an attack roll, you might be having to make a saving throw or an ability check, and you roll your 20-sided dice. Now, whatever you're rolling and adding to that is beside the point. Your modifier doesn't change. I rolled a 9. I might decide that 9 plus my modifier is just not going to be enough. So I'm going to roll an additional dice. So grab another 20-sided dice. I'll take the 9 out of the way so I don't move it and knock it. I'll put it on the other side. You might actually be able to see it there. And then I roll that dice and I rolled a 5. Now, at this point I have to decide which dice I'm going to use. I rolled lower than the 9, so I'm obviously going to ditch the 5, because usually rolling low is not a good thing, and we'll keep the 9. So my use of luck at this particular point hasn't actually been hugely it hasn't been a huge advantage. That's the concept behind that. Now, if we're up close and I get hit by an attack, such as the Cyclops swings its spiked mace at me, makes an attack. Okay, it's rolled a 2 here, so we wouldn't really bother using something like luck. But if I rolled a 20, now this is a good time to use a luck point. So I don't want a critical hit on my my dwarf who has the lucky feat. So I roll another 20-sided dice, and that's a bit cocked. I think we might have to roll that again. Yep, it is. Doesn't often happen, but it does happen sometimes. Okay, so that's a 7. Okay, so 7 is a lot lower. I can live with a 7. So we take the 7 and we ditch the 20. Okay, that's the concept of using luck. You can select which dice out of the 2 are going to be used for that attack roll that's made against you. So there's your basics in terms of the feat and how it's used. Now let's talk about something like Sage Advice, because there's quite a few questions that people tend to have. A player's character can't use multiple luck points in the same round. Or on the same roll, should I say, on the same roll. So you could, in the same round, if you have an ability check you have to make, a saving throw, or an attack roll, but with regard to a specific roll for an attack or for a saving throw, you can only apply 1 luck point at a time. So you couldn't say, if they get a 20, but you didn't get a dice roll that was low enough, you wanted something that was nice and low, and you rolled your luck points and you rolled up a 16, which would still result in you getting hit. You can't go and decide, I'm going to use another luck point and roll another dice, another additional dice. You can't do that. Okay, you only get to use 1 luck point for every dice roll that has taken place, whether you're making the dice roll or somebody else is making the dice roll. So there's the basics there in terms of whether you can actually stack up those luck points on a multiple, the same dice roll. Okay. You can use the lucky feat on death saving throws. That's right. If you are down and out and things aren't going well, and you roll your 20-sided dice roll to make a death saving throw, and I get a 6, well, I don't want a failure because, the failure's bad. I can use my luck, grab another 20-sided dice, roll that. I don't want that one, but I still have to choose. I either take the one, which would be a much worse result, or I take the 6. So obviously in this case, I take the 6, get 1 failure rather than 2 failures. So it's really going to come down to the luck of the dice. That's the nature of it. But the chances are you're not usually going to roll a 1 when you're using your luck point, which is why you use it in the first place. So you can use it on your death saving throws. Awesome. Yes, you can use the lucky feat on a dice roll that has disadvantage. That's right. You can use a luck point on a dice roll that has disadvantage. You can use one that has on a dice roll that has advantage or disadvantage. So it doesn't really matter. Either one of those. I'm going to show you that last because it's a lot more complicated and very confusing, and I can just see the chat is just going to go completely bananas when I start explaining that process because it took me a little while to figure it out. The Dungeon Master decides if a player can see the attack roll dice for an enemy attack when using the lucky feat. So that means that when our Cyclops here, controlled by the Dungeon Master, makes an attack roll, I don't need to actually reveal to the player what the outcome of that dice roll is. Okay? It's up to the Dungeon Master to decide. So I know that could sort of hamstring your use of lucky, but if they're the sort of Dungeon Master who rolls behind the screen and they won't tell you what the dice roll was, then there's really not much you can do about it. Okay? If you can't see the dice roll, you can see your own dice rolls, but when it comes to the Dungeon Master, if they're the sort of person who roll behind the screen and won't let you know what the dice number value was on the dice, then there's nothing you can do about that. Okay? It does not stipulate that they have to reveal that value. Okay, so now I know that's going to be unpopular for sure. You can potentially counter an enemy's critical hit with the lucky feat, which I just demonstrated just a second ago. So yes, you can. If somebody gets a critical hit on you and you know that they got a critical hit because they rolled a 20, Dungeon Master actually presents you with the dice, you can decide to use your luck point and get rid of that critical hit by rolling a second dice and taking that result instead of the 20, just as I showed you before. Okay, so we've covered all of the basics. Now we're getting into the more complicated stuff. A player can't take the lucky feat multiple times for the same character. Now, I know it would be tempting at level 4 to pick up the lucky feat. That's fine. And then when you get to level 8, try to pick up the lucky feat again. But no, you can't. Oh, and it would be wonderful to have 6 uses of luck points, but you can't do that. Unfortunately, for those of you who thought you might be able to get away with that, it's not going to work. Unfortunately, forget about it. Okay, so let's move on to how do we deal with the likes of using a luck point when there's advantage or disadvantage. We're going to start off with the first application, disadvantage. So we've got 2 dice. I'm going to have to roll 2 dice, and usually with disadvantage, you take the lowest result. So I roll this. Now, it can apply to you, your attack roll, your saving throw, or an ability check, or it might revolve around something like your Dungeon Master making a roll with an attack. But remember, if you can't see the dice, don't even bother with it. So let's say we're making an attack roll against our Cyclops. And in this case, I rolled pretty well. So I rolled a 4 and I rolled a 19. But it's disadvantage, which means I would be happy with the 19, but I can't take that. I have to take the 4 because it's disadvantage. This is where I'm going to use my luck point. So that means I get to add an additional d20 to the dice roll. So I'm going to take those dice out so I don't knock them over. Okay, right now I'm stuck with a 4. A 4 plus my attack modifier, which is only 4, is only 8. We don't really want that. So roll another dice and see if we can improve our chances. Okay, so this is good. So there's an 18 with my luck point. What happens at this point? I've rolled my additional dice. You need to remove one of the d20s that you do not want involved, and you're going to leave 2 of the dice. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ditch that 4 because I've got disadvantage. I don't want the 4. An 18 and a 19 with a disadvantage is still a pretty good deal. Okay? I still have disadvantage. It still applies. So I don't get the 19 for my dice roll, but I can take the 18, so 18 plus 4 is 22. I'm definitely going to hit that Cyclops, and woohoo, things have gone pretty well. Who would have guessed? Who would have guessed? The dice just worked for me, just as it will probably work for you. Who knows? Who knows? It might not work for you. So that's the concept, okay? You roll the additional dice, you remove one of the d20s, and you leave 2 of the dice, and you still have disadvantage, taking the lowest result on the 2 dice remaining. And the same thing applies with advantage. If you want to use your luck point with advantage, maybe because you rolled incredibly low with advantage, so maybe you roll like a 1 and you rolled really horribly and only got like a 7, and you had advantage, which is where you take the highest number. Now the 7's still not very high and the 1's not very high, so what you do is you get rid of those with advantage, put them out of the way, grab your additional dice, you roll that, I get an 11. Now I want advantage, so the idea is I can replace one of those d20s with advantage. I get rid of the 1, take the 7 and the 11, it's advantage, so I keep the 11. Okay, I get to keep the 11. So it does improve your chances of actually being successful with any kind of attack, saving throw, or ability check. And that is how it's applied. Very, very simple, not too difficult. I'm sure you'll have plenty of questions, which you're welcome to ask right now if you want to. I have a whole bunch of videos for players and Dungeon Masters on feats and other rules involving Dungeons & Dragons 5e, which you're welcome to go and check out, and I suggest doing that at some point. Look, if you want to help support the channel, by all means, go and check out my other videos. I do have a Patreon page where you can support me, get access to content that other people don't get access to. You also get priority on the videos that I make. I also have an affiliate link to the book depository in Amazon where you can buy stuff online, and that helps support the channel because I get a small commission. I also have a merchandise shop where you can buy stuff revolving around my channel, you might say. Look, make sure to share, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.